Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Women's AM. This morning I'm joined by Sister Saima, Sister Nazia and Sister Sultanah to discuss racism in the Ummah. Of course, we want to hear from you, so please do call into the studio with your comments or questions. The number is on your screens right now, or you can tweet us at Islam Channel #115. Right, well, we got cut off for a quick break there. Sister Nazia, if you could finish off your point that you were saying.
No, I was just going to add another point, that there is this selective attitude as well within the community, where it's amazing. They will follow certain aspects of the deen and then they will leave other aspects of the deen.
How does it affect women? Say racism in women. I think marriage is quite a hot topic at the moment.
Marriage is a classic example where obviously no one, of course, they're going to consider a Muslim. Yeah. You know, they're going to want to find a Muslim for their daughter, for example. But here's the big question now. All of a sudden, isn't it amazing, the whole categorization of the potential groom has to come from a certain region, from a certain town. The girl has to look in a certain way. She has to be a certain skin color, or the brother needs to be a certain... All of these classifications, this is exactly what I mean in terms of...
It's a bit ridiculous, considering character should be the first thing that you look at.
You can look for things like, are they from a good family? Yeah. If they're from a particular town, what kind of town are they from? Do you know what I mean? Like, so you can look for those things. What the other thing you're talking about, which is what skin color is she, and what height is she, and what kind of feet does she have? Yeah, I've heard that.
Oh, dear.
You know, does she have these are things which are fundamentally, they are racist because their roots are to do with the view that we have of beauty. Especially for women, the view that we have of beauty, the ideas, and where do those ideas of beauty come from? They come from Western constructs. They come from white constructs of beauty. So, is she fair? You know, has she got straight hair? Has she got? If she's got like an afro, then that's not considered beautiful, is it? So, and this is the problem, you see. So, because as an Ummah, we are affected. The bar is set up by white society, and no matter which country you come from, because of colonialism and capitalism, that's the bar. We are victims of that. And so when I say that we kind of enslave each other, we don't need white people to do this. We kind of just, we do it quite well ourselves, and we think that we're Islamic. It's just like, oh, no, but I am Islamic, but I want a fair bride for my son.
It's true, and I think it gets covered up sometimes by saying that, it's my personal preference, and personal preference is allowed in Islam, which it is allowed. But when somebody comes across and says, you know, my personal preference as a fair-skinned person is that I want to marry a very, very dark-skinned brother, your question about that, why though? You know, and your question, and you always, most of the time, get a negative response.
This concept of preference and all of that, we need to understand that psychologically we are victims of colonization. We are, you know, the coloniality of ourself is not just defined by things on the outside. Our minds are colonized. So our concepts of love, you know, what we consider romance, all of those kind of things. You know, I was reading about, you know, celebrities, female celebrities who adopt these African babies, and, you know, there was a whole thing about it, that there's all these white celebrities who've got these beautiful little black babies, and, you know, and the whole idea of that is you know, it's that kind of white saviour complex. They've gone to save the world, and so I think it kind of still manifests. This whole idea of preference, let's be real, your preference is defined by the society you live in. It's not you woke up one day and you suddenly had a preference. It's been defined by that. And unless we are conscious of it, of course Muslims fall into that. And sometimes I think Muslims do it the worst because they just whitewash it with this idea of the deen. You know, I have the deen, and so therefore I'm not racist anymore. You know, I can just use a few Islamic phrases and therefore racism has kind of gone out of the window. And I think this is the most dangerous bit, because we need to be so conscious of that, so conscious of where that comes from, and not just adopt a culture which is not us, adopt a thinking which is not us, and be conscious of, you know, consciously doing that, especially for women. If sisters are real victims of it, but they do it to one another as well. You know,
absolutely.
You know, Simon, you were saying that, you know, when you marry and, you know, and they will say, oh, is your prospective groom fair? You know, these kind of things. That comes from women. That doesn't necessarily come from
highlight issues that are occurring, which is great. But what does Islam actually say about these issues? Because racism was at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Sister Nazia.
There was an incident once where there was a gathering, and in the gathering there was Salman al-Farsi, who was from Persia, if I translate that, and there was also Shoaib, who was from Greek kind of origins, and there was Bilal present at the time, and he was obviously African. And this man, when he entered this gathering, he could explain why the Arabs were there, but he couldn't explain their presence. So what he actually turned around and said was, if the Medinian tribes of Aus and Khazraj support Muhammad, they are his people, that is Arabs like him. But what are these people doing here? So when the Prophet ﷺ heard about this, he actually got angry, and what he did was he straight away summoned the people to the masjid for salah, and then afterwards he addressed them saying, "O people, know that the Lord and the Sustainer is one. Your ancestor is one, your faith is one, the Arabism of any one of you is not from your mother or father, it is no more than a tongue language, whoever speaks Arabic is an Arab." He also says in another narration, "Let people stop boasting about their ancestors. One is only a pious believer or a miserable sinner. All men are sons of Adam, and Adam came from dust." You know, all of these evidence, the kind of Islamic teachings, they point to the fact that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the different races, this was one of his signs of omnipotence. It wasn't something to be used as a bashing kind of thing, that I'm a better group to you, or you, do you see what I mean? And it's the kind of thing that is pointing out to the fact that we all ultimately come from Adam, we're all made from the same mechanism, we've all got the same purpose in life, same direction, we're all going to have the ultimate same destination, which is we're going to die, we're going to face Yawm al-Qiyamah. The thing that separates us, not these superficial things of what a person looks like, how tall they are, or what they did for it's their taqwa, isn't it? It's their God consciousness. These are the things that we take for value. But yet we live in a society that there are these kind of labels, there are these kind of aspirations and these kind of things that we have to aspire to. But the question is, no one ever asks who set those standards. Yeah. Who's the person setting these standards? Because we should be looking at the standards set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Instead, we're conforming to people, and actually we're falling in with their ideas. Why should they have the upper hand?
I think it takes a brave person to now start breaking these traditions. Because I think what happens sometimes is that you're fed subconsciously. You don't actually know sometimes as a child where you got this from, that you have this kind of like fear of another group of people sometimes, that you're told as a child maybe to keep away or don't make friends with certain groups of people in the playground. Yeah, you're not actually sure where you got that from. You just grow up holding that.
That information is obviously coming from somewhere. I mean, you've touched on a really good point, the fact that we're all made from dust ultimately, and Allah made us all. So why is it we judge people on the very things that they were created?
But I think sometimes it's the language. I've noticed sometimes when I'm around Asian people, and let's be honest, we are very racist towards black people.
Absolutely.
Black people, the darker you are, those are the people who suffer the most amount of racism. And I've noticed sometimes in some, and I don't understand it, even though I should because I'm Asian myself, that, you know, there's sometimes a discussion when you're talking about somebody black, people will suddenly automatically switch into saying, oh yeah, he's colour. And it's just like, I don't understand why you've just switched from speaking in the English language when you're speaking about a black person to revert back to your native tongue. What is the purpose of that? Because that's a psychological process that's going on about the way and the treatment and the view of black people.
I view that this is the mentality. It's a derogatory. Exactly. It's a mentality that's come in.
And this has come from people who are practicing. This is, you know, I'm not talking about you kind of, you know, so...
Well, just to conclude then, how can we make sure that, you know, this doesn't become a reoccurring problem? What can we do differently to block this sort of racism within our community?
I think first and foremost we need to reignite the intermarrying. Yeah, we need to allow our daughters and sons to marry outside of their culture. This has been recommended by Umar bin Khattab himself, that marry outside of your tribe and your culture. Your children will be more beautiful and stronger. Which I think that's true. Yeah, I think it's great. It really does happen. So we need to encourage that more. Second of all, we need to educate our children. My kids, they're mixed, yeah, and they never actually ask the question ever in the whole of their life, why is she black, or why is she white, or what? They've never had that. Only when they went to school, then it got introduced to them, which just shows that at home which is the first school, we were never taught that. We never ever discussed this, that your dad has got light skin and your mum has got dark skin and your this has got this and you're different colour to your cousins. We never discussed this, and this is really important that we educate our children from the home and not to make this an issue. Unfortunately though, I really want to give an example that highlights what Sister Sultanah said. My father was in a mosque and he was praying. He was in the middle of the Jamaat. He actually wanted to break his Jamaat out of anger because he overheard the Quran teacher call over all the boys by their names, and then when it was a Somali boy he called over, he referred to him as Gale, and he called him over like that, which is a derogatory term. And my father was so angry, he wanted to break the salah. So our homes, as parents, we have to educate our children with the correct understanding that race is not an issue in Islam. It's a way of recognizing one another, period. But in the mosque, we need to address this, because in the mosque there is racism.
There's ignorance as well, isn't it? They're so
I don't think it's just ignorance. I think it's actually a taboo issue, and there is not consciousness about amongst Muslims to even discuss it. You cannot possibly change yourself if you are not recognising that you are, you carry racism, and unless we're real about that,
self-examining yourself and questioning.
There's no way that
Isn't
you can
it amazing? It's amazing how some people have no problems being friends with you. I've got no problems having people friends from all different communities, but suddenly isn't amazing the ugliness of the racism surfaces actually through these issues of marriage, for example. You're good enough to be a friend, but you're not good enough to be my daughter-in-law, my son-in-law, or XYZ. Do you see what I mean? And it's like, unless you stop and self-evaluate what you are doing and really question yourself, what is the intention? Not hide behind these kind of excuses, you know, like the one that you said, well, oh, this is what I find attractive. It's really rigorously questioning what's defined your perception.
That person is lower than you. That's why you don't find that person attractive.
Jazakallah khair, sister. I think this topic's been really amazing. I'm so glad that we've touched on it. I think we could go on for another couple of episodes just on this one topic. Race and ethnicity are among the many wonders of Allah and should not be a criteria for which we judge one another, but rather should be something that fosters unity and love. Allah says in Surah Al-Hujurat, "O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is all-knowing and all-acquainted." We've had a great discussion this morning, alhamdulillah, but if you've missed any of the episode, do not despair. You can catch the repeat show tomorrow morning at 6 a.m, inshallah. And of course, we have our highlight show on Sunday at 3 p.m. that will give you a roundup of all the best bits for this week. We're off to another break now, but do stay tuned as we're back for our last segment, where we'll be discussing and looking into the quote from Hassan al-Basri, "Whosoever does not hold his tongue cannot understand his deen." See you in just a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.